The glass towers of Manhattan stretched toward a cloudless October sky, reflecting the ambition of millions who walked its streets every day. Among them was Marcus Chen, 23 years old, carrying a cardboard tray with 4 steaming cups of coffee through the marble lobby of Sterling and Associates, one of the most prestigious investment firms on Wall Street. His hands trembled slightly, not from the weight, but from the pressure of his first week as an intern at a company where a single mistake could end a career before it even began. Marcus had fought hard to get here, the son of immigrants who ran a small laundromat in Queens. He'd worked 2 jobs while earning his finance degree at NYU. He'd studied until 3 in the morning, survived on instant noodles and black coffee, and sacrificed every weekend for 4 years. This internship was his golden ticket, his chance to prove that someone from his background could make it in a world dominated by Ivy League graduates and family connections. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, revealing the sleek minimalist offices of Sterling and Associates. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the Hudson River. Men and women in tailored suits moved with purpose through corridors lined with contemporary art, worth more than Marcus's parents had earned in their entire lives. He stepped out carefully, balancing the coffee tray, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Chen, where's that coffee?" barked Thomas Whitmore, a senior analyst known for his sharp tongue and even sharper elbows. He was standing near the conference room with 2 colleagues, all of them checking their watches impatiently. "Coming, sir," Marcus said, quickening his pace. He'd been warned about Whitmore during orientation. The man had a reputation for breaking interns, for testing them until they cracked or quit. 3 interns had left in tears the previous month alone. As Marcus approached, he noticed a figure emerging from the executive suite. The man was tall, perhaps in his late 40s, with distinguished features and olive skin. He wore an immaculate charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. His dark eyes held an intensity that seemed to assess everything and everyone in a single glance. This was Khalid Al-Rashid, the mysterious Arab investor who'd recently acquired a significant stake in Sterling and Associates. Office gossip painted him as ruthless, brilliant, and impossibly wealthy, a man who'd built a financial empire spanning Dubai, London, and New York. Marcus tried to step aside to let Al-Rashid pass, but the corridor was crowded with employees rushing to a morning meeting. In that split second of distraction, Marcus's shoe caught on the edge of a briefcase someone had carelessly left on the floor. Time seemed to slow. He felt himself falling forward, the coffee tray flying from his hands. He watched, helpless, as all 4 cups arced through the air in perfect synchronization. The hot liquid splashed across Khalid Al-Rashid's pristine suit, soaking his jacket, shirt, and tie. Coffee dripped from his sleeves, staining the Italian fabric dark brown. The corridor fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his face burning with shame and terror. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll pay for the cleaning, Marcus stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. His entire body shook. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, could sense the collective gasp of horror from everyone watching. This was it. His career was over before it had truly begun. He'd be fired, blacklisted, become a cautionary tale told to future interns. Khalid Al-Rashid looked down at his ruined suit, then at Marcus. The young man stood frozen, expecting rage, expecting to be destroyed by this powerful man whose time was worth thousands of dollars per minute. But instead of anger, something unexpected flickered across Al-Rashid's face. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. "What's your name?" Al-Rashid asked, his voice calm, tinged with a slight Arabic accent. "Marcus Chen, sir. I'm an intern. I'm so sorry." Before anyone could speak further, we need to pause this incredible story for just a moment. If you're enjoying this tale of unexpected encounters and life-changing moments, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, stories that will surprise you, move you, and make you think differently about the world, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's get back to Marcus and discover what the millionaire does that shocks everyone in that building. Al-Rashid raised a hand, silencing the murmurs around them. "Come with me," he said simply. "You too, Mr. Whitmore." Thomas Whitmore's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Sir, I apologize for this incompetent intern. I'll have him removed immediately and," I said, "come with me." Al-Rashid's tone left no room for argument. He turned and walked toward the conference room, coffee still dripping from his jacket. Marcus and Whitmore followed, the intern's legs feeling like rubber, certain he was about to be humiliated in front of the entire senior staff before being escorted out by security. The conference room was empty, a vast space with a polished table that could seat 20 people. Manhattan sprawled beyond the windows, indifferent to the drama unfolding in this high-rise office. Al-Rashid closed the door behind them and removed his ruined jacket, laying it carefully over a chair. He turned to face Marcus, who stood with his head bowed, waiting for the inevitable. "Look at me," Al-Rashid said. Marcus forced himself to meet the man's eyes. "Tell me about yourself. Where are you from?" The question caught Marcus completely off guard. "Sir, your family, your background. Tell me." Marcus glanced at Whitmore, who looked equally confused, but nodded curtly. "My parents came from Guangzhou 25 years ago. They run a laundromat in Queens. I'm the first in my family to go to college. I graduated from NYU in May, top 15% of my class. I worked really hard to get this internship, sir." "What did your parents sacrifice to come here?" The personal question made Marcus uncomfortable, but something in Al-Rashid's eyes seemed genuinely interested. "Everything, sir. My father was a teacher in China. My mother was a nurse. Here they couldn't get their credentials recognized, so they started the laundromat. They work 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. They haven't taken a vacation in 20 years. Al-Rashid nodded slowly, as if Marcus had confirmed something he'd suspected. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city. "Do you know my story, Marcus? I know you're a very successful investor, sir, that you've built companies across 3 continents. That's the summary. But do you know where I started?" Al-Rashid turned back to face them. "I was born in a refugee camp on the Jordanian border. My father had been a successful merchant in Palestine, but war took everything from us. We had nothing, absolutely nothing. When I was your age, I was working as a janitor in a bank in Dubai, cleaning toilets and mopping floors for 12 hours a night." Whitmore shifted uncomfortably, clearly wondering where this was going. Marcus stood still, transfixed. "One night," Al-Rashid continued, "I was cleaning the executive floor when I accidentally knocked over a filing cabinet. Papers went everywhere. Confidential documents. I panicked, started picking them up as fast as I could, but as I was gathering them, I noticed something. The bank was about to make a terrible investment decision based on flawed analysis. I knew it was flawed because I'd been teaching myself finance, reading every book I could find, attending free lectures, studying while everyone else slept." He paused, a slight smile touching his lips. "I did something incredibly stupid and brave. I wrote a memo detailing the problems with their analysis and suggesting an alternative approach. I left it on the CEO's desk anonymously. I thought I'd be fired if they found out a janitor had been reading confidential documents. Instead, 3 days later, security brought me to the CEO's office. I thought my life was over." Marcus felt his breath catch. The parallel was impossible to miss. "The CEO asked me one question. Did you write this? I could have lied. I could have denied it. Instead, I told the truth. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, 'You're fired as a janitor, but you're hired as a junior analyst. Don't make me regret this.' That decision changed my entire life." He saw something in me that no one else had bothered to look for, because they only saw a janitor, not a human being with potential. Al-Rashid walked back to stand directly in front of Marcus. That CEO took a chance on someone who had nothing, who came from nothing, who'd made a mistake but showed character in how he handled it. He taught me that true wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in the opportunities we create for others, in the lives we change, in the potential we help unlock. "Sir, I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "You apologized immediately. You didn't make excuses. You didn't blame the person who left their briefcase in the hallway. You took full responsibility and offered to make it right, even though the cost of cleaning this suit probably represents a week of your salary. That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could." Whitmore cleared his throat. "Mr. Al-Rashid, while I appreciate the sentiment, company policy requires—" "Mr. Whitmore, how many interns have you trained this year?" "7, sir." "And how many are still with the company?" Whitmore's jaw tightened. "2, sir. But this is a demanding environment. Not everyone has what it takes, or perhaps," Al-Rashid said quietly, "not everyone has been given what they need to succeed." "Tell me, how much time do you spend actually mentoring these interns, teaching them, investing in their development?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Whitmore's face had gone from red to pale. Al-Rashid turned back to Marcus. "I want to offer you something, not because you spilled coffee on me, but because of how you handled the moment after. For the next 6 months, you'll work directly with me as my personal analyst. You'll attend every meeting I attend. You'll have access to every deal I'm working on. You'll learn from the best lawyers, accountants, and strategists in this industry. It will be the hardest 6 months of your life. I'll demand more from you than anyone ever has, but if you prove yourself, when those 6 months are over, you'll have a permanent position in my company, not as an intern, but as a junior partner. Marcus felt the room spin. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say yes or no, but understand this. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm making an investment. I believe you have potential, but potential means nothing without work, dedication, and integrity. I'll expect you to prove me right every single day. Can you do that? Marcus thought about his parents, about the laundromat in Queens, about every sacrifice they'd made. He thought about the professors who'd stayed late to help him, the friends who'd encouraged him, the dreams he'd carried through 4 years of exhaustion and uncertainty. This was the moment everything had been leading to. Yes, sir. I can do that. Good. We start tomorrow. 6 a.m. sharp. Be ready to work harder than you've ever worked. Al-Rashid extended his hand. Marcus shook it, feeling the firm grip of a man who'd built empires from nothing. As they left the conference room, Whitmore lingered behind. Mr. Al-Rashid, I must protest this decision. The intern has been here less than a week. There are more qualified candidates who've been with us for months. Al-Rashid stopped and turned. Mr. Whitmore, do you know why I invested in this firm? Our track record, our client base. I invested because I believed Sterling & Associates had potential to be more than just another Wall Street firm chasing quarterly profits. I believed it could be a place that identified and nurtured real talent, regardless of where that talent came from. But I'm beginning to wonder if I was wrong. He paused, letting the words sink in. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to personally mentor the 2 interns, still under your supervision. You're going to invest time in their development, teach them everything you know, and help them succeed. If either of them quits or is fired in the next 6 months, we'll have a very different conversation about your future here. Do I make myself clear? Whitmore swallowed hard. Crystal clear, sir. Excellent. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go home and change out of this coffee-soaked suit. There was a hint of amusement in his voice now. Over the following weeks, the story of the intern who spilled coffee on the Arab millionaire spread through Sterling & Associates like wildfire. Some people whispered that Al-Rashid had lost his mind. Others suggested Marcus must have connections no one knew about, but those who worked closely with them saw something different unfolding. Marcus arrived at the office every morning at 5:30, a full half hour before Al-Rashid's required 6 a.m. He studied market reports, memorized client portfolios, and prepared briefing documents before the rest of the building had even woken up. In meetings with Fortune 500 CEOs, he sat quietly, absorbing every word, every negotiation tactic, every subtle shift in tone that signaled advantage or vulnerability. Al-Rashid was true to his word. He was demanding, exacting, and relentless. When Marcus made mistakes, and he made plenty, Al-Rashid would take him aside and explain not just what went wrong, but why it mattered and how to think differently next time. He taught Marcus to see patterns others missed, to read people's motivations beneath their words, to understand that finance was ultimately about human psychology, not just numbers. But Al-Rashid also shared his own stories. Over late-night work sessions reviewing contracts, he'd talk about the years he'd spent teaching himself English by watching American movies with Arabic subtitles, about the first deal he'd ever closed, a small investment in a Dubai property that everyone else thought was worthless, about the family he'd lost in conflicts across the Middle East, and how that loss had driven him to create something meaningful with his life. Money is just a tool, Marcus, Al-Rashid said one evening, as they watched the sun set over Manhattan from his office. What matters is what you build with it. I've made billions, but the achievements I'm most proud of are the schools I've funded for refugee children, the small businesses I've helped entrepreneurs start in communities that banks won't touch, the people whose lives changed because someone gave them a chance. Marcus learned that Al-Rashid funded scholarships for over 200 students across 3 continents, that he'd personally mentored dozens of young professionals from disadvantaged backgrounds, that he regularly visited the refugee camp where he'd been born, not as a triumphant success story, but as someone who'd never forgotten where he came from and who still felt responsible for those left behind. 3 months into his mentorship, Marcus was sitting in on a negotiation for a major commercial real estate deal. The client, a brash developer from Texas, was pushing for terms that seemed reasonable on the surface, but would actually expose Al-Rashid's firm to significant risk. The developer's lawyers had crafted the contract carefully, hiding the problematic clauses in dense legal language. Marcus had spotted the issue while reviewing the documents the night before. His hand trembled as he slid a note across the table to Al-Rashid during the meeting. Sections 12.4 and 18.7 create liability loop that could cost us $40 million if project fails. Al-Rashid read the note, his expression unchanged. Then he called for a 15-minute break. In the hallway, he reviewed the sections Marcus had flagged, made 3 phone calls to his legal team, and returned to the negotiation room with a completely different approach. By the end of the day, they'd restructured the deal to protect their position, while still giving the developer what he needed. As they walked back to the office, Al-Rashid put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You just saved us millions. More importantly, you demonstrated that you're not just learning the mechanics of finance. You're learning to think independently, to question assumptions, to protect those who trust you with their capital. That's the difference between a good analyst and a great one." But not everyone at Sterling and Associates was happy with Marcus's rapid ascent. Thomas Whitmore, forced to become a better mentor to his remaining interns, resented the implicit criticism of his previous methods. A group of analysts who'd gone to Harvard and Wharton muttered about affirmative action and unfair advantages. They couldn't understand why this kid from Queens, this intern who'd been there for just months, was getting opportunities they'd been waiting years for. The tension came to a head during a company-wide presentation. Al-Rashid was unveiling a new investment strategy focused on emerging markets, and he'd asked Marcus to co-present the analysis they'd developed together. Standing in front of 100 senior professionals, Marcus felt the weight of every skeptical eye on him. He could see Whitmore in the back row, arms crossed, expression dubious. Could see the Ivy League analysts exchanging knowing glances, certain he was about to crash and burn. Marcus took a deep breath and began. He laid out the macroeconomic factors driving growth in Southeast Asia, explained the political dynamics shaping investment opportunities in Africa, detailed the technological leapfrogging happening in Latin America. He spoke for 20 minutes, fielding aggressive questions from skeptics, defending his analysis with data and logic, never once losing his composure. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Al-Rashid started clapping, and slowly, the rest of the room joined in. It wasn't enthusiastic applause, not from everyone, but it was respect. Grudging, perhaps, but genuine. After the presentation, a senior partner approached Marcus. "That was impressive work, young man. Where did you get your MBA?" "I don't have one, sir. Just an undergraduate degree from NYU. The partner blinked in surprise, then looked at Al-Rashid, who was standing nearby. "Khalid, you found yourself a diamond in the rough. I found someone who was willing to work harder than anyone else in this room," Al-Rashid replied. "The diamond was always there. It just needed the right environment to shine." As the months progressed, Marcus's relationship with his parents deepened in unexpected ways. He'd started bringing Al-Rashid's dry cleaning to the family laundromat, giving his parents the business and the premium rates Al-Rashid insisted on paying. His father, who'd always been a man of few words, would sometimes ask Marcus about his work over dinner. "This man, this Mr. Al-Rashid," his father said one Sunday evening. "He is a good man. He's an exceptional man, Dad. He's teaching me things I never would have learned anywhere else." His mother reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hand. "We are very proud of you. But remember, success is not just about money or position. It's about character, about how you treat people, about staying humble, even when you rise." Marcus thought about his mother's words often in the following weeks. He saw how Al-Rashid treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or the security guard in the lobby. How he remembered people's names, asked about their families, took genuine interest in their lives. How he never used his wealth or power to diminish others, but rather to lift them up. The 6-month mark arrived on a cold March morning. Snow was falling softly over Manhattan, coating the city in pristine white. Marcus arrived at the office to find Al-Rashid waiting for him, along with the senior partners of Sterling and Associates. "Marcus," Al-Rashid began, "6 months ago, I made you a promise. I said that if you proved yourself, you'd have a permanent position in my company. You've exceeded every expectation I had. You've worked harder, learned faster, and shown more integrity than I could have hoped for. So today, I'm keeping my promise." He slid a document across the table. Marcus picked it up, his hands shaking slightly. It was a contract offering him a position as junior partner in Al-Rashid Investments, with a salary that made his head spin, equity participation, and a guarantee of continued mentorship. "Sir, I don't know what to say," Marcus whispered, his eyes stinging with tears he refused to let fall. "Say you'll remember where you came from. Say you'll use this opportunity to create more opportunities for others. Say you'll mentor someone else the way I've mentored you. That you'll look for talent in places others won't think to look. That you'll judge people by their character and potential, not by their pedigree or connections." Marcus looked up at this man who'd changed his life, this refugee who'd become a billionaire, this immigrant who'd built bridges across cultures and continents. "I promise, sir, all of it." Al-Rashid smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "Then welcome aboard, partner. Now, let's get to work." We have a world to change, one opportunity at a time. 2 years later, Marcus stood in that same conference room, but this time, he was on the other side of the table. Across from him sat a young woman named Aisha, a recent graduate from a state school in Michigan, daughter of Syrian refugees. She was brilliant, hungry, and terrified, interviewing for an analyst position at a firm that rarely looked at candidates without Ivy League credentials. Marcus asked her the same questions Al-Rashid had once asked him, about her family, about what they'd sacrificed, about who she was beneath the resume and the nervousness. He saw in her eyes the same desperate hope he'd once carried, the same determination to prove that her background didn't define her limits. At the end of the interview, Marcus extended his hand. Aisha, I'd like to offer you a position as my personal analyst. For the next 6 months, you'll work directly with me. It will be the hardest 6 months of your life, but if you prove yourself, you'll have a permanent position here. Can you do that? Aisha's eyes widened, filling with tears she couldn't quite contain. Yes, sir. I can do that. As she left, Marcus stood at the window, looking out over Manhattan. Somewhere in Queens, his parents were probably at the laundromat, pressing clothes and folding sheets, still working those brutal hours. Even though Marcus had offered many times to help them retire, they insisted on working, said it gave them purpose, but they'd started closing on Sundays now, spending that day together as a family. His phone buzzed. A text from Al-Rashid. I heard you just hired someone. Good choice. Remember, we're not building careers. We're building character. Marcus smiled and typed back, thank you for teaching me the difference. The snow had stopped falling, and the sun was breaking through the clouds, casting Manhattan in golden light. Marcus thought about that morning 2 years ago when he'd spilled coffee and thought his life was over. He thought about how a single moment of grace from one person had changed everything, how kindness and recognition had proven more powerful than any credential or connection. The story could have ended so differently. If Al-Rashid had been a different kind of man, if he'd reacted with anger instead of empathy, if he'd seen only the ruined suit instead of the potential in the young man who'd ruined it. But he'd chosen to see deeper, to remember his own past, to create opportunity where none had existed, and now that gift was multiplying, spreading outward like ripples in water. Aisha would work hard, prove herself, and one day she'd mentor someone else. That person would mentor another. The cycle would continue, creating a network of opportunity that transcended background, ethnicity, and circumstance. This was the real plot twist, Marcus realized. Not that a millionaire had been kind to an intern. That happened sometimes, if rarely. The real twist was that the millionaire had seen his younger self in that intern, had remembered what it felt like to have nothing and be given a chance, and had decided that the best use of his power was to multiply that chance for others. The real twist was that success, true success, wasn't about how high you climbed or how much you accumulated. It was about who you lifted as you rose, about the opportunities you created, about the potential you helped unlock in others. It was about remembering that everyone has a story, that dignity and worth aren't determined by job titles or bank accounts, that a moment of grace can change the entire trajectory of a human life. Marcus turned from the window and got back to work, already planning Aisha's training, already thinking about the other talented young people he could identify and mentor. The work was never finished. There were always more people who needed chances, more potential waiting to be recognized, more lives that could be transformed by someone choosing to see value where others saw only obstacles. And somewhere in the building, in offices and cubicles throughout Sterling and Associates, other young professionals were watching this story unfold, taking notes, learning that the truest measure of success wasn't what you achieved for yourself, but what you made possible for others. The coffee stain on that expensive suit had long since been cleaned away, but the impact of that moment, the chain reaction it had set in motion, would continue spreading for years, for decades, creating opportunities and changing lives in ways that could never be fully measured or contained. Because that's the thing about grace, about second chances, about recognizing potential in unexpected places. It doesn't just change one life. It changes every life that person touches, and every life those people touch, on and on, rippling outward into the future, in patterns too complex to predict, but too powerful to ignore. Marcus picked up his phone and called his parents. Dad, Mom, I just hired someone. I think you'd really like her story. As he talked, he could hear the pride in their voices, could feel the weight of their sacrifices, and the meaning of this moment where everything they'd given him was now being passed forward to someone else. This was the real inheritance they'd left him. Not money or connections, but values, hard work, integrity, the understanding that everyone deserves to be seen, to be given a chance, to have their potential recognized and nurtured. These were the things that truly mattered, the things that built not just careers, but character, not just companies, but communities. And it had all started with spilled coffee and a choice to respond with grace instead of anger, with recognition instead of dismissal, with possibility instead of judgment. Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with the smallest acts of human kindness, with one person choosing to see another person's worth when everyone else sees only a mistake. That was the lesson Marcus carried forward. That was the legacy Al-Rashid was building. And that was the story that needed to be told, again and again, until it became not the exception but the expectation, not the surprise but the standard, not the plot twist, but the plot itself.